Words have failed. Weapons are being drawn, and we're about to have ourselves a fight. So let's take a closer look at how combat works in the Dark Eye. I covered the basics of how dice are used in combat in an earlier video, but I'll reiterate it here in somewhat more detail. As in most TRPGs, the first thing that happens when a fight breaks out is initiative is rolled. For the Dark Eye, this is 1d6 plus your initiative stat, plus any modifiers. After that, the highest initiative goes first. In combat, you get 1 action, 1 free action, and 1 defense. Action covers the basic things you might want to do in combat. Ready or switch weapons, make an attack, use a lever or switch, move a short distance, use magical spells, so on and so forth. The list isn't exhaustive, but it covers things that might take just a moment. Free actions are much quicker things, like shouting a short sentence, dropping something, or falling to the ground. And defense is a one-time thing where you can roll for either parrying or dodging, though there's a few extra rules regarding that I'll cover later. While this covers most actions you might want to take in combat, there's also long actions that you can take. These take several turns before they can finish, and cover things like reloading ranged weapons, as well as casting certain longer spells. Long actions can be interrupted by things such as being attacked or other environmental factors like loud noise or a rolling ship at sea. To retain concentration under these circumstances, a character needs to pass a self-control check. Attack rolls are fairly simple. If you roll beneath your attack value, you succeed. The target then gets a chance to defend, however, and this is where the first major details come in. Ordinary characters, that is, those that don't have access to fate points, such as NPCs, only get to make 1 defense roll in a turn. This means several players ganging up on a lone NPC could end very poorly for this NPC. Characters with fate points are permitted multiple defense rolls, however, and penalties are imposed for each defense beyond the first, at a cumulative -3 per extra defense. There are other special abilities that might allow a character, with or without fate points, to make other, unhindered defenses. One of these is for creatures that are non-humanoid, such as demons or elementals. These creatures have a general defense rating, as opposed to the 2 separate values of parry and dodge. These creatures can defend an unlimited number of times, and do not reduce their defense in doing so. Close combat weapons are also a very important consideration in the Dark Eye, specifically regarding a quality called reach. Reach comes in 3 varieties: short, medium, and long. Short weapons include most daggers and short swords, and fists and shields as well. Long weapons are most spears and polearms. Everything else is probably going to be considered a medium weapon. Each of these categories naturally has their own advantages and disadvantages. Starting with long reach weapons, using one causes anybody attacking you using a medium reach weapon to suffer a -2 penalty to that attack, and a -4 if they're using a short reach weapon. Though this comes with the drawback of receiving a -8 to parries and attacks if you're using one in a closed-in space. Short-reach weapons have the reverse of these effects. They're at a -2 to attacking against a medium weapon and a -4 for attacking a long. However, they receive no penalties for being in a cramped space. And medium reach is obviously the middle ground where everything is all medium. They receive a -2 when attacking long weapons, short weapons receive a -2 when attacking them, and in a cramped space, they get a -4 to attacks and parries. This means that in a fight between somebody with a knife and a spear, the spear has the advantage, unless the knife wielder can either lure them into a narrow hallway, or they happen to have some spare knives handy and wouldn't mind throwing a few of them. As an aside, while these additional details do make the game a little more complicated, this complexity adds some extra weight to the decisions you make for your character. In most other games, there isn't much reason to have your character carry, much less learn, different kinds of weapons. For example, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, our same fight between a knife and spear fighter would likely go to the spear fighter, but only because a spear does more damage. All other factors are held constant. There's also a few other factors to remember about the different kinds of weapons as well. Parrying a weapon while unarmed still causes you to take damage from the weapon. It'll count as being parried, perhaps for any special abilities that require you to parry a weapon, but you're still going to get wounded. Additionally, if you have a weapon and successfully use it to parry an unarmed attack, that attacker automatically takes half the weapon's damage. Chain weapons are really hard to defend against. Most weapons are at a -2 to parry against them, if they even can. Shields also only offer their normal parry bonus against chain weapons. Chains have their own drawbacks though. They can't be used to parry, and botches happen on a 19 as well as a 20. Daggers are kinda pitiful. They can't be used to parry polearms, chain weapons, or two-handed weapons. But besides fists, they're the only short-reach weapon out there. Fencing weapons are in the same boat as daggers. They can't parry polearms, chains, or two-handed weapons either. Defending against a fencing weapon is a little bit tougher though. Those impose a -1 penalty to anyone trying to defend against them. Ranged combat has a similar level of detail as its closer ranged counterpart. Each ranged weapon has 3 range categories: short, medium, and long. Attacking someone at medium range offers no advantages or disadvantages. Meanwhile, using a ranged weapon at its short range gives it a +2 to the attack roll and a +1 to the damage. The reverse is true if you're attacking within the long range though. You get a -2 to the attack and a -1 to damage. In fact, regarding ranged combat, it's all penalties from this point onwards. How your target is moving affects your accuracy, according to this chart right here on page 242. The basics are this. If a target is standing in place, completely still, you get a +2. This is probably for inanimate objects or people patiently sitting somewhere. In most other cases, if they're moving slowly, say 4 movement points or yards in their last action, there's no penalty or bonus. Any faster, and you can be at up to a -4. Conveniently, page 242 is where all the ranged combat penalty charts are located, so you at least don't need to go too far to find them all. The Dark Eye, as I've mentioned before, has an insane level of detail. So much so that I'm deeming it necessary to come up with a special section in a multi-part video series about it dedicated specifically to shields. I love this game, but I digress. Shields, oddly enough, are treated as weapons. It's a little jarring at first to think of it this way, but let's review what's already been established. Your skill with a weapon is what determines how well you can avoid damage when using that weapon. By treating shields as weapons meant primarily for avoiding damage, you avoid making yet another subsystem by using the same internal logic that's already been established. Shields have an attack and parry rating, like any other weapon, though in most circumstances, you'll probably not want to attack with one. Their attack ratings are pitiful, with their only saving grace being that they count as short-reach weapons. Their parry ratings, however, are doubled when you use them to parry, unless this parry is against a chain weapon. Let me give an example. If my character has a parry rating of 8 with shields, and they were wielding a Thorvalar shield, which is listed as having a parry bonus of +2, I'd actually be defending with a total of 12, since I would double that +2 bonus. Though, against a chain weapon, this would be reduced down to 10 since I only get the normal parry bonus for my shield. Shields are also useful since they're normally the only way someone can parry against ranged attacks, or from attacks from larger enemies, but we'll get into that in just a moment. One final thought on shields that I have is this. For as great as they are, I'm surprised none of the professions have using them as an included skill. Nonetheless, a character can benefit from having a shield even if they don't have the skill to use it. In this case, you'd have to choose to parry with some other weapon, but you'd get the normal parry bonus of the shield added to your parry rating of the weapon that you're using. There are some other odds and ends that I don't usually see brought up in most other fantasy games, but I still feel they're worth mentioning in The Dark Eye. Combatant size affects close and ranged combat in different ways. The obvious mention is that larger targets are easier to hit in ranged combat and smaller targets are harder. These same effects are not had in close combat though. Only the smallest of targets are made more difficult in close combat. Larger targets, on the other hand, are not easier to attack. Instead, if you're attacked by a larger foe, You can't parry with a weapon. You have to use a shield, or dodge out of the way. And against the biggest of enemies, not even a shield will help you. You are left with only one option in this case.
Dodge!
Mounted combat is something I've never actually seen used in many RPGs, and for that reason I can't really recall what any of the rules for fighting from horseback are in other games. With that said, mounted combat in the Dark Eye works within the constraints of its normal combat engine by applying a laundry list of exceptions. The most notable of these includes that armor is less encumbering on horseback, and there's a few extra maneuvers one can only perform while on a horse. Trample, which is exactly what it sounds like. You have your horse run over your target. And mounted charge, which takes a little bit of a running start from your horse, but significantly adds to the damage you could normally do. So, in summary, the Dark Eye has some very detailed rules on combat, where the very weapon you use is more than just whether your weapon cuts, stabs, or bashes. It's a lot to get a grip on all at once, especially with how detailed literally everything else is and can be in this game. And this is before special abilities characters can learn come into play. The flip side to this complexity is that it gives a lot of options in combat, right out of the box. For example, guild mages in Aventuria are forbidden by law from wielding weapons other than daggers and staves. While this does limit a mage from wielding some of the more damaging weapons, they can still benefit from choosing a long mage's staff. This would grant them not only the bonus to their parry value, but also penalize enemies that attack them with anything that isn't long reach. And daggers are easily the best choice in any situation a staff would be impractical. So, all told, the complexity of the Dark Eye isn't just for the sake of being complex and creating a needless learning curve. In return, it means a lot of your small choices matter a lot more. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, give me one of those little thumbs up likes. And if you want to learn more about the Dark Eye or any other great but dense TRPGs, feel free to subscribe. And remember, videos on the internet are no substitute for reading your rulebook. So, with all that said, I am Aaron Tershale, and I will see you all next time.